I'm Victoria. Power isn't taken. It's granted. That was the first lie I was ever told. For 20 years, I believed my father's corporation, Sterling Materials, was a kingdom he was patiently teaching me to rule. I learned its geography in the warehouses, smelling of raw limestone and damp clay. I learned its language in the accounting department, its politics on the factory floor. I bled for it, negotiated for it, dreamed for it. I was not the heir apparent. I was the heir present. Everyone knew it. My father, Alistair Sterling, would nod from the head of the table, his silence a form of approval so potent it fueled me for years. And then, with one sentence in a board meeting, the kingdom was handed to a ghost. This isn't a simple story of corporate backstabbing. Those are commonplace, almost banal. This is a story about the architecture of betrayal. How it can be built, brick by hidden brick, over decades, until the structure is so complete you're living inside it, mistaking it for a home. And it's about what happens when you decide to take a sledgehammer to your own inheritance. The ghost's name was Julian. My cousin. My father's brother's son. He vanished from the family tapestry when we were both in our 20s. A blur of bad decisions, whispered debts, and a final, dramatic fallout with my uncle. He moved abroad. We heard snippets. A failed venture in Dubai, a consultancy in Singapore, a marriage that didn't take. He was the family's faint, slightly embarrassing echo. His return was not triumphant. It was quiet, calculated. He appeared at a charity gala, standing beside my father. The picture in the society pages showed them smiling, my father's hand on Julian's shoulder. The caption read, "Sterling Scion returns." Scion. I remember the word burning on the newsprint. I was the scion. I had been in the office that day, finalizing the acquisition of a rival firm. When I asked my father about it, he was dismissive. Julian's turned a corner. Wants to make amends. I'm giving him a small advisory role in Asia-Pacific. Akaindnis, Victoria. Nothing that touches your domain. Your domain. He still used the possessive. I believed him. My mistake was the fundamental one. I believed the story we were still telling. 6 months later, at the quarterly board meeting, the agenda seemed routine. Until the final item, succession planning. My father, then 78, cleared his throat. He spoke of legacy, of continuity, of the future. He spoke of needing new energy and a global perspective. And then he said it. After considerable reflection, and with the full support of the board, I am naming Julian Sterling as President and Chief Operating Officer, with the explicit understanding that he will assume the role of CEO upon my retirement. The air didn't leave the room, it solidified. I became a statue of myself, perfectly composed, trapped in amber. I felt the glances of the board members. Men and women I'd fought with, persuaded, outperformed. Their faces were masks of pity or worse, complicit blankness. Julian stood. He gave a short, humble speech about honor and learning, and serving the sterling legacy of Sterling Materials. His eyes met mine across the polished table. There was no triumph in them, only a cold, absolute certainty. He hadn't won a competition. He had collected on a debt. I just didn't know what the currency was. The official reason was strategic repositioning. I was offered the role of Vice Chair of Strategic Development, a beautiful title for an empty room. My authority was silently stripped. Reports stopped coming to me. My assistant was reassigned. Meetings I had convened for years were now chaired by Julian, who would send me a bland, bullet-pointed summary afterward. But the passive aggression was just the prelude. The sabotage began subtly. Confidential details of a bid we were preparing for a massive public works contract appeared in a competitor's proposal. Our numbers were just close enough to be suspicious, but just different enough to be deniable. The blame, through a series of whispered conversations, seemed to point toward my old team, and by extension to me. A leak. Then the longshoreman deal. A shipping contract I'd nurtured for 18 months. The night before the signing, our primary contact received an anonymous dossier. It contained fabricated internal emails suggesting Sterling Materials was planning to renegotiate rates downward after the first year, calling our partner's financial stability into question. The deal vaporized. Millions in profit gone. The stench of internal treachery was now overwhelming. And then the threats came home. Not emails. Not calls. Physical, paper threats. Slipped under my front door. Left in my mailbox. The first was a photograph of me leaving my office, taken from a car across the street. Printed on it, in cut-out magazine letters, "Time's up." The second was a page torn from a corporate manual on succession, with the clause about involuntary termination highlighted. The third was a single dead black rose, its stem wrapped in a printout of my own severance agreement. A document I had never seen, but was being prepared for me. Someone wasn't just pushing me out. They were trying to terrify me into running. I went to my father. I laid the photos, the rose, on his vast empty desk. "This is happening," I said, my voice shaking with a fury I could barely contain. "Someone is trying to scare me out of the company. It has to be Julian." He looked at the objects as if they were artifacts from a distasteful play. He didn't touch them. "Victoria," he sighed, the sound-weary final. "Paranoia does not become a leader. Julian is focused on the future. This is likely a prank. A disgruntled employee. You're under stress. The board feels, and I must agree, that your reaction to this transition has been emotional. Perhaps a leave of absence would be wise." That night I didn't sleep. I sat in my living room, in the dark, and I made a list. Not a list of grievances. A list of assets. My assets. 20 years of insider knowledge wasn't just about trade secrets. It was about relationships. It was about knowing which client hated conference calls, which one valued handwritten notes, which distributor's son had a hockey tournament next week. It was about knowing the cracks in Sterling's foundation, the late payments to small suppliers, the quality control shortcuts on the Beeline products, the growing customer frustration with Julian's new, impersonal efficiency protocols. I had a non-compete, of course. A draconian one. It covered material sourcing and distribution for 5 years, within the entire region. But as I read it, in the blue light of my laptop, I saw its limitations. It covered the what, but not the how. Sterling sold clay, aggregates, composite polymers. What if I didn't sell materials? What if I sold solutions? A consulting firm. A service that optimized supply chains, negotiated sourcing, guaranteed quality auditing. I wouldn't handle a single bag of cement. I would handle the intelligence that made the cement valuable. Axiom Solutions was born on a legal pad. I would be the ghost in Sterling's machine, and I would dismantle it from the inside out. I called it the Silk Rebellion. Quiet, seamless, and deadly. My weapon was not confrontation, but superior service. My first targets were not Sterling's biggest clients, but its most neglected ones. The family-owned construction firm that Sterling had been slowly deprioritizing. The architectural practice that found Julian arrogant and unresponsive. I met them for coffee for lunch. I didn't badmouth Sterling. I simply listened to their problems. And then I said, "What if I could solve that for you?" Not as Sterling. As me. I presented a plan. Using my network, I could source higher-grade polymer from a Canadian supplier Sterling had rejected because the margins were thinner. I could connect them with a logistics partner who offered more flexibility. I would be their single point of contact, their advocate. They signed. One by one. The money was secondary. The satisfaction was a dark, potent fuel. Every client I took was a brick removed from Julian's wall. I knew the timelines, the pain points. I would swoop in precisely when Sterling's service was failing them. It was a surgical strike. Within a year, Axiom was a thriving, profitable thorn in Sterling's side. Julian was forced to explain to the board the unfortunate attrition of certain mid-tier accounts. He blamed market forces. I knew, and he knew I knew, that it was a targeted, intelligent raid. But revenge is a mirror. As I built my new kingdom, I started to see the reflections of things I'd ignored in the old one. The sheer, personal vindictiveness of the threats. The board's unified, lockstep support of Julian, a man they barely knew. My father's profound, almost pathetic refusal to see what was happening. It didn't add up to simple corporate coup. The math was wrong. The passion of the hatred was too personal. This wasn't just about a CEO title. This was about erasure. The crack in the foundation appeared in the form of an old man named Leo. Leo had been the plant foreman at our original quarry for 40 years. He'd retired before Julian's return. A man of grease, grit, and absolute loyalty to my father. He'd also taught me how to read a geological survey when I was 16. I tracked him down to a fishing cabin. I went to him not as a former executive, but as the girl who used to steal his hard candies. I told him everything. The succession, the threats, my new company. He listened, whittling a piece of wood, his face like worn leather. When I finished, he was silent for a long time. Then he said, "Your daddy carried a weight his whole life. A weight named Sawtooth Ridge." Sawtooth Ridge, a defunct Sterling mine, closed in the late 80s, before I joined the company. A minor footnote in corporate history. An uneconomical site. Wasn't uneconomical, Leo said, his voice low. Was a graveyard. A tunnel collapse. November 87. 2 men. Miguel and Sean. They were down there. The supports, they were substandard. We all knew it. Management knew it. The order was to push through to the seam. My blood ran cold. A cover-up? Weren't no investigation to cover up, Leo said, putting his knife down. The official story was a natural seismic shift. Unpreventable. The families were paid. Quietly, quickly. Off the books. Your Uncle Robert. He was running that site. Julian's father. The black sheep. And my father? I asked, barely a whisper. Your father was CFO. He made the money disappear. He structured the settlements. He saved the company from bankruptcy, and he saved his brother from prison. Robert was never right after that. The guilt, or the shame, it ate him. That's what their big fight was about before Robert died. Julian must have known. He must have blamed your father for destroying his. The architecture of betrayal suddenly had a cornerstone. Sawtooth Ridge. 2 dead men. A hidden crime. My father's guilt, and his debt to his brother, transferred to the next generation. I began to dig with a new purpose. I used my new resources, my private investigator. We found the descendants of Miguel and Sean. We found records of mysterious trust funds set up in the late 80s, funded from a holding company that was later dissolved. The trail was cold, but the shape of it was there. And then, I found the clause, buried in a 1988 corporate bylaws amendment, in dense legalistic language, was what I came to call the Atonement Clause. It stipulated that in the event of the incapacitation or retirement of Alastair Sterling, a family equity share of 30%, held in a blind trust since the Sawtooth settlement, would be released to the lineal descendant of Robert Sterling, with a board seat and preferential succession rights. It was my father's lifelong penance, codified into corporate law. He hadn't chosen Julian over me. He had signed that choice into existence decades ago. To quiet the ghosts in a collapsed tunnel. Julian hadn't mysteriously returned. He had come to collect his inheritance, an inheritance paid for with silence. the threats, the sabotage. It wasn't just Julian securing his position. It was him ensuring I would never dig deep enough to find this. His entire power was built on my father's secret. My existence, my competence, my rightful claim. It was all a threat to that foundation. I now possessed the ultimate insider knowledge. Not of client lists, but of the original sin. I had a choice. I could expose it. Go public with the cover-up. It would destroy Sterling Materials utterly. It would destroy my father's legacy, send elderly men to prison, reopen wounds for the families of Miguel and Sean. It would be nuclear. Or I could use it. I requested a meeting. Not with my father. With Julian. In the very boardroom where he'd been crowned. I arrived first. I placed 2 files on the table. He walked in, oozing a casual arrogance. Victoria. To what do I owe the pleasure? Has Axiom come to sue for peace? No, Julian. I've come to discuss terms of surrender. Yours. He laughed, a dry, hollow sound. Really? I slid the first file toward him. It contained the client list I'd taken, with projections of their lifetime value. Then the second file. On top was the coroner's report for Miguel Rodriguez, listing the cause of death. Beneath it, a copy of the atonement clause, with key lines highlighted. Finally, a photo of the 2 sons of Sean O'Malley, now grown men, standing outside their mother's house, a house I had quietly paid off the mortgage on. The color drained from Julian's face. The arrogance shattered, revealing the terrified, entitled boy underneath. Where did you get this? The same place you got your sense of entitlement. The family vault. You didn't earn this company, Julian. You blackmailed your way into it with a secret everyone was too guilty to say out loud. He stared at the documents, his hands trembling. What do you want? My father's retirement is effective immediately. You will resign as CEO for personal reasons. You will recommend to the board that I be installed as interim CEO to stabilize the company. You will retain your 30% share. Silent. Non-voting. You will never set foot in this building again. And if I don't, then I release all of this. To the press. To the regulators. To the families. Your father's name becomes synonymous with negligence. My father's with cover-up. The Sterling name becomes trash. Your shares will be worthless. You will be unemployable. You will also, I added, my voice ice, have to explain to the authorities why you hired a private investigator to follow and intimidate me. Yes, I know it was you. The rose was a bit melodramatic, don't you think? It was a bluff partially, but the fear in his eyes told me I'd hit the mark. He was trapped. His power was a ghost, and I had just shone a light on it. He had built his kingdom on my father's secret, and I held the blueprint. It happened quickly. My father's sudden health concerns. Julian's desire to pursue other opportunities. The board, panicked by client attrition and smelling blood in the water, turned to the only person who knew the company inside and out. Me. The prodigal daughter, returning to save the firm. The press ate up the narrative. Sterling heiress reclaims legacy. My father lives in the house I bought for him, overlooking a different ocean. We speak. It is cordial, filled with a vast, unspeakable chasm. He knows what I know. He has never acknowledged it. Sometimes, I see the ghost of Sawtooth Ridge in his eyes. I am both his savior and his judge. It is a lonely duality. Julian exists on the periphery of the life he wanted, wealthy and irrelevant. A ghost once more. I run Sterling Materials. And I run Axiom Solutions. One is the legacy I inherited, tangled with crime and guilt. The other is the kingdom I built myself from scratch, out of sheer will and wounded pride. I merged them. The new entity is simply called Axiom. The Sterling name was retired. A quiet burial. Some of the old board members are gone. New ones sit at the table. The first official act of the new board was to establish a permanent, endowed foundation in the names of Miguel Rodriguez and Sean O'Malley, funding scholarships for their grandchildren, and for mine safety advocacy. It is not justice. It is acknowledgement. It is the only peace I could broker with the dead. So did I win? I have the title. I have the power. I took it back. But it does not taste of victory. It tastes of ash and resolved calculus. Revenge taught me that I am capable of things I never imagined. I am a strategist, a predator, a quiet force of destruction. Confronting my family's betrayal taught me that love and guilt can be twisted into weapons, and that legacy is often just a pretty word for debt. The woman who spent 20 years building a company for her father is not the woman who sits here today. That woman believed in a story. This woman knows she is living inside a correction to that story. I am not the rightful heir on a throne. I am the cleanup crew. The solvent. The one who had to become ruthless enough to contain the rot so the business, and the people who depend on it, could live. If you are fighting your own battle, in your own office, your own family, remember this. The deepest betrayals are never just about the present moment. They are vines that have roots in deep, hidden soil. To fight them, you must be willing to get dirty. You must be willing to discover that the people you loved are flawed in catastrophic ways. And you must be willing to see that same capacity for darkness in yourself. Power isn't granted. Sometimes, it has to be reclaimed from the wreckage of the very stories that were meant to give it to you. And once you have it, you must decide what to build in the clearing you've made. Thank you for listening. If you want to hear more story like this, please like the video and subscribe the channel. Hit the bell icon to get notified.